We have an update on the Miles Bridges situation from Miles Bridges himself. Plus, we'll talk about Kai Jones and James Bouknight. Will they get any minutes in the last 22 games of the season? We'll get to all of that today on Locked On Hornets.
You're Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your pods, and that includes YouTube. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's PrizePicks.com. Promo code Locked On. I'm Walker Mail. You can find me on WFNZ from 12 to 3, and that is Doug Branson. Find the Substack, Every Hornets Boxscore, on everyhornetsboxscore.com. So we got some breaking news last night, Doug. I don't know how much sense you put into this. I don't know how much credence you put behind the validity of Miles Bridges' statement himself, but we did get an update from Larry Lage. That's right, a AP writer for Michigan State, of the Associated Press. He was at Michigan State, Indiana last night, the game that saw Michigan State beat the Hoosiers, but Miles Bridges was actually in attendance. And Larry Lage, he wrote at 10:40 last night on Twitter that Miles said he could be back in March. He said, quote, "It's been a long process, but I might be back in March," end quote. I don't know what all that means. It could mean that he could just be on the roster and serving a suspension that begins in March. I don't know if he's going to be an active player at that time in March, but that's what he said at 10:40 in attendance of the Michigan State-Indiana game. And again, Larry Lage, the AP, is the one that broke that on Twitter. What do you make of this comment? It's basically, I mean, you know, it's a Miles Bridges update. We haven't heard from Miles really at all this entire process. So any quote is worthy enough to just put it out there in the public. But is there anything behind this that you can take as, okay, we've got a real storyline here?
Well, I'll say that Larry Lage sounds like a fake name. Just like right off the bat. Like, it just sounds like something like, who reported that? It was Larry Lage. Are you sure that wasn't Larry Page? Nope. I'm going to go with Larry Lage.
Yeah, it does.
But it is a real reporter. It is a real quote. The quote, "It's been a long process. I might be back in March." So I don't know. I don't know that this is really all that significant, because we don't have any word from the NBA as to the completion of that investigation. We do know from Mitch Kupchak, the general manager of the Charlotte Hornets, that they are waiting for that NBA investigation to complete before they make any kind of maneuvers. I think you and I, having discussed it, having thought about it, I think both of us are on the same page that Miles Bridges is more than likely going to be back in a Charlotte Hornets uniform at some point. I still don't think it's going to be this season. That would be odd. Although, you know, he pled no contest in his case. The case that you and I often cite as relative to this one would be the one around Jeffrey Taylor, where he pled guilty and got a 24-game suspension. So I honestly expect it to be less than that. But anything around that would be the remainder of the season. So I don't expect him to be back this season. And I don't really know what to take from this quote.
Yeah, with Miles Bridges saying this, look, not to put it out there on Twitter too, it's one thing if it comes from Miles Bridges. It's one thing if it comes from Clutch Sports, which is his agency. It's another thing if it comes from the NBA or an authority figure that actually has power in instituting him back into the league. And the NBA right now is still undergoing an investigation. And with Jeffrey Taylor pleading guilty, it's a big distinction. Jeffrey Taylor pleading guilty, suspended the 24 games. That's the big time suspension you can go back to regarding domestic abuse here in the last decade or so of the NBA, maybe even a little bit more than that now. And now here we are with Miles Bridges. The thing is, though, this is a little unprecedented with domestic or felony domestic violence, right? So I think he only served 9 days in jail. Jeffrey Taylor did. Doesn't excuse anything he did, but there is a legal distinction between misdemeanor and then even felony. Mm-hmm. And Miles Bridges was looking at more jail time than 90 days if he would have pled guilty, if he would have been found guilty. Right. So the NBA also undergoing its investigation too. I do kind of like this a little bit to Deshaun Watson, not in the offenses that they've been accused of, but in the fact that the NFL did not have a guilty party legally with Deshaun, but they still took it upon themselves as a league, as an entity, to suspend him for a majority of an NFL season. It's a big deal, right? So with Miles Bridges, I would imagine the NBA takes the same type of approach. It's been documented that the people expect him to serve a pretty significant suspension. Significant can mean a lot of things, though. Significant would be 40, half a season. It could be a whole season. It could be 2 seasons if you want to put them at the highest penalty, like an OJ Mayo or Tyreek Evans for the anti-drug program. I mean, honestly, I'd be surprised if it was 2, but Doug, I just don't know what number to pin down here. Like, it's going to be interesting. I do think you are going to get some sort of significant suspension. So when Miles Bridges says he's going to be back in March, I have to imagine that he's just going to be instituted again, like he's going to be brought back on the roster and then he'll start serving that suspension. That's just the way I interpret it. It does not mean that is gospel and that's what's going to happen, but that's just kind of the way I interpret it if that happens, right? He said might. I mean, even Miles said might, so he's not even sure.
But I think if the NBA handed down that kind of significant suspension, the Players Association would fight it pretty vehemently. Like I'm pretty certain there would be a battle there. So like, question. Yeah, I honestly, I'm going to be on the other side of this from you. I don't expect the suspension to be even as significant as the Jeffrey Taylor suspension, but we'll see. And, Miles seems pretty confident that he'll be back in March. Maybe that's just my cynicism showing. Effectively, it seems like the league has colluded with teams at this point to say, hey, look, we're doing this investigation. Don't do anything until we finish this investigation. So, I mean, effectively, he's been suspended for an entire season, if not just by the letter. It's not an actual suspension, but it effectively was. He's lost a year of his sort of prime or whatever. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what this means. It's very vague. And it comes from Larry Lage, which I think is a fake name.
There you go. That's a great sign off. I will say, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if Miles is confident that he'll be back this year, right? Like he says, might. So I don't know. Who knows?
Okay, but even if let's just say the NBA came down and said, all right, you have a 10-game suspension, and then the Hornets say, okay, we're going to re-sign him. It's not going to play. I can't imagine him being then reinserted in the roster. Like it would be very odd. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying I would not expect him to suit up this season. To me, that would be absurd.
No, yes. I'm sorry. I thought when you said he seems to be confident that he'll be back this season, right? I thought, I was just saying he said might. It's very vague. So yeah, who the hell knows, man? I mean, this thing has been going on for so long. And he's right about one thing. It has been a long process. And so we'll see exactly what's right. If it's going to come back this season or if he's going to come back next season. And if he's going to be a Charlotte Hornet, we both imagine that he would be. We've seen some reports that the Hornets have prioritized bringing Miles back, but it's not been widely accepted, right? That was from Michael Scotto. Nobody else really picked that up and confirmed that. So
that also, you know what, Michael Scotto, that sounds like a fake name too. I need confirmation. I need these people to show some videos with like one of those pictures that has the date on it so that I know that these people actually exist. Until then, I'm just going to assume they are AI generated robots.
Come on. Larry Page, Michael Scott. Why are we putting some fancy stuff on it? It doesn't need to be Lage and Scotto. Scott, Page, done. Let's get to it. All right. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
Kai Jones, James Bouknight, 2 first-round picks under Mitch Kupchak over a year ago. Haven't been seeing a whole lot of them lately. Will we be seeing some of them in the last 22 games of the regular season? We'll get to that, excuse me, in just a moment. Struggling continuously to do so, and Doug laughs every single time. It's PrizePicks. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, and I might have to have you read it if it continues to get worse than this. What you can do is you can download.
Oh, what was that?
Gracious, Doug. Oh, God.
It's
so bad. It's so bad, Doug.
You're
it's
drowning.
So bad.
You're drowning. You're drowning. You're bathing in phlegm right now. Go ahead. I'll give you another shot.
It's so gross.
I pull up the read.
How does PrizePicks work, you ask? You can pick 2 to 6 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. No competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. And you can download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks gives you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks gives you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. I'm sorry, PrizePicks. More Locked On Hornets coming up next.
Is Locked On Hornets.
Adam Silver had Ahmad Rashad up on stage, and he used his phone to body scan Ahmad Rashad, and then they inserted a digital version of Ahmad Rashad into the highlight. And so I'm looking at this and going, just fix my league pass. I don't want to be in a highlight. I would just like to actually watch the highlight without my application logging me out, freezing, dropping all of the time. Fix my league pass before you insert me in the game, please and thank you.
It's time for more of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
All right, we are back. We are smoother than ever. Thanks to PrizePicks.
PrizePicks is going to take money away from us for that.
It was so bad. I was drowning and you laughed at me. You pointed, and instead of throwing me a raft,
well,
here's why.
Here's why. Because it is genuinely funny when the radio professional messes up on this show. That's the beauty of this show. I get to come on here as the wild card, the wild cat. I can mess up and do it. In fact, it's only funny when I try to get serious. It's the beauty of this show.
I had to mute my mic and continue to go through some problems over here. This is the kind of thing that I'm dealing with right now. You know what, though? I'm glad that didn't happen during the Miles Bridges discussion, because then it would just be all sorts of awkward. At least we got to PrizePicks. You know what, PrizePicks? I'm not sorry, okay? If it had to happen, it had to happen during your read. It can also happen during this Kai Jones conversation. It's totally fine to have phlegm during Kai Jones and James Bouknight conversation. The question is, will Kai Jones get more playing time? Because he was in the rotation to some degree earlier this season. James Bouknight was at the very beginning, and then it was clear Steve Clifford needed to go in a different direction, and he did so. Kai was kind of in that center rotation outside of Mason Plumlee, where you go with Nick Richards, and then Kai, doesn't play very much, and then eventually you go to Mark Williams. But this was a question asked to Rod Boone as he did a mailbag for the Charlotte Observer, and he does seem to think that Kai Jones is going to get some playing time. He says the Hornets view Kai as a center, but he could also get backup power forward minutes, eating into JT Thor's time. And he also thinks JT Thor will get more minutes now with Jalen McDaniels absent. So maybe you just go Thor at the 3, more Thor for you guys out there. Kai Jones possibly could eat into those 4 minutes. What do you make of Kai Jones possibly getting some run?
I snickered when you said they view Kai as a center because they never play him there. And it's understandable why they haven't played him there this season, because they had a backlog at center. No one got injured. You had to work in Nick Richards, Mason Plumlee, occasionally Mark Williams. Now you trade Plumlee. So it goes from impossible to play Kai at center to somewhat possible, because I don't think Nick Richards has played in a way that makes him sort of inevitable. Like you would really have to play him at backup center all of the time, especially as we get into the later portions of this post All-Star break period. I think you can do a little bit more experimenting with not only Kai at the center position, but maybe even a kind of a 2-center situation with Kai and Mark, or Kai and Nick. You can get crazier as this thing becomes sort of more absurd and as the losses pile up. So I do think he's going to get some minutes. The difficult thing for Kai is that I think one of the things that Clifford really values, and it's why Bryce McGowan is getting a lot of playing time right now, one of the things that he really values is doing things that you can do well and avoiding trying to do things that you don't do well until you learn how to do them well, right? Playing outside of yourself, essentially. And the difficulty for Kai is he has a tendency to do that, because I think he grew up believing he was a point guard and then grew up into a center and really hasn't gotten out of that mindset of wanting to really handle the ball and do some kind of crazy things, which makes him an interesting sort of raw prospect. But also when you're trying to insert him within a roster that is attempting to win, which they were trying to do earlier in the season, it can get a little dicey. And it's difficult to ask him to do those things when you're playing him out of position. So it's been difficult for Kai, but I still hope he gets an opportunity as we go down the stretch here.
What's funny about Kai, too, is the fact that you're playing him at a more skilled position, I guess, because if you're going to move him further away from that center spot where theoretically you could have him just undergo pick and roll, not to say center position isn't skilled, but if you're moving him further away from that as a power forward, then you're asking him to possibly shoot more and be more skilled, and that's going to hurt him and then hurt his run and his potential run.
Well, and in Summer League, we saw him shoot a lot. In fact, in that first Summer League, he attempted 10 three-pointers and maybe made one, or did he go 0 for 10? He either went 1 for 10 or 0 for 10.
I think he made like 1, yeah.
Yeah, so I think certainly the idea of Kai Jones, I think like the idea of Mark Williams, is going to be a center that can shoot threes. It is the dream of Steve Clifford. Like, I hope that before Steve Clifford exits the league, and it feels like this may be Steve Clifford's last rodeo in the league, I really hope that at some point they give him an opportunity to play 5 out, because he won't shut up about it. You know, when he plays other teams that can play 5 out like the Celtics, he always mentions, you know, this team plays 5 out. That's how you win basketball games. And I'm not criticizing him for not shutting up about it. It's just like, that's the thing. The thing that wins is 5 out. The Hornets have never been able to play 5 out. Except when they had Spencer Hawes. That's like the last time they've been able to play 5 out basketball.
Well, unless you mean like going small with PJ. I mean, but if you're talking about
with like a legit,
center,
I'm saying 5 out with like a legitimate, center that can
like
also rebound. 5 out when you can also rebound.
So we talked about Kai Jones. Rod Boone was also asked if James Bouknight will get any minutes, and Rod replied,
here we go. What did he say?
And I quote, "You mean with Greensboro?" Oh, damn.
Burn.
Yeah. Yeah.
Booney burn.
Yeah, it really was. And so James Bouknight wouldn't count on it, and it's not like Steve Clifford isn't playing young guys, because the person that's getting more minutes over James Bouknight is Bryce McGowan's, your second round rookie, compared to a second year first round pick from last year. Now, granted, I don't know if this means that Steve Clifford should be keeping James Bouknight out at all cost, but this is what Steve Clifford said. I remember this in the month of January, and Scott Fowler wrote about it in his column in the Charlotte Observer. He said what the fans obviously don't see is that the young players have a chance every day, like Tuesday in practice when he was referencing this. They do play every day. They do play live. I do watch closely, and we do filming. I think there's sometimes this misconception that when guys are not playing minutes, they don't get a chance to be seen. Nothing could be further from the truth. And then I remember him also talking about it. He said, none of these guys on this team can come to me and say they were never given a chance. None of them. And that's true. I mean, all of them have logged real minutes. I mean, pretty much everybody that I can think of has logged real minutes, and James Bouknight included. What do you make of Steve Clifford's comments there and James Bouknight seemingly only getting run in Greensboro the rest of the season?
I think the problem, too, is I don't think his numbers in Greensboro this season have been particularly gaudy. He's averaged in 15 games played. He started in 10 of them, which is odd. I think one I think would be right to raise an eyebrow of like, why didn't he start 5 of these games? It's interesting. But he scored 15.7 points per game, 5 field goals made on 12 attempts. That's 40.5% from the field overall. Is shooting 39% from 3, not getting to the line a ton, only 2 free throw attempts per game, 4.7 rebounds, 2 assists, and a little under a steal. So those aren't like gaudy G League numbers that you would expect from a lottery pick to be putting up in the G League. So I think that's a problem. But I think the deeper problem is what you referenced, that what they're seeing when he does get the call up, what they've seen behind closed doors is not enough evidence to get him back on the floor, because he did have a chance. And I thought in that chance, he displayed exactly what I just talked about with Kai Jones, playing outside of himself, taking really ill-advised shots, doing things with the basketball that are just outside of his, range, that at least that he's shown, at least that he's displayed his ability with the basketball. And then defensively, he offers, I think, less than nothing. I mean, I put him in the Malik Monk category of like, your offense is not to the level. You're not shooting the basketball well enough to compensate for the fact that defensively you're a negative.
Do you want to bring up Jalen McDaniels on the heels of your Malik Monk reference as well? Do you want to do? I mean,
Well,
Go ahead.
well, I'll say, yeah. I mean, I think it's Jalen McDaniels is the opposite in my mind. Like his defense was not so stellar that it compensated for the fact that when you needed him to knock down a corner three in the fourth quarter, he just couldn't do it. It was just the opposite. Offensively, his offense did not compensate, or his defense did not compensate for the fact that his offense was just you couldn't count on it.
Yeah, this year in a bigger role. And then even with Malik, like I think Malik gave you more offensively when he shot 39% on the regular court. And James Bouknight only doing that in Greensboro. So like when you're talking about Bouknight altogether, you're talking about a guy that isn't even getting run. I mean, how many first round picks can we go to that wasn't getting really any run their second year? You know, because it's Kai, it's James, but you can't even if Malik was a failure here in Charlotte, in the fact that they didn't want to give him a second contract, like Malik was still getting time.
Yeah.
You know, if you go, PJ, Miles, it's not good. That draft in the first round is looking to be pretty by far the worst. And it was the one that had the chance to be the best if you talk about just having two bites at the apple in the first round.
Yeah, and I will say, too, the differences between the situations that you mentioned, and you could throw Frank Kaminsky in there that had a serious rotation role his rookie season that did grow before it shrank pretty quickly, Frank the Shrank. And the differences between those situations were the team didn't have any choice, really, but to play Frank where they played him. There was no other option. With Bouknight and Kai, they've had plenty of more veteran, better options to look at, and Bouknight and Kai have not been able to show that they are in both their opportunities when they actually get playing time, and then obviously behind closed doors, they haven't shown enough to overcome those obstacles. So I think that's the big difference. And honestly, I put that on the organization. Like they drafted Bouknight knowing that they had some wing depth. They drafted Kai knowing that he was a center raw prospect that was going to take multiple years, and that they had several other centers that they had to take a look at. And then they drafted Mark on top of that. So yeah, I mean, I kind of put that on the organization a little bit too.
Well, the only thing that breaks the difference in those situations is that Bryce McGowan's is getting your minutes now. If James Bouknight was getting the Bryce minutes, then fine. But now it's Bryce, and James is still in Greensboro, and the beat writer is laughing at the fact that you might play the last 20 games. So very, very big difference there with Bouknight. It's tough, man. It's real tough, and hopefully he gets a shot. If not here, then maybe with a different organization. All right, one more segment to go. All of the losing, all of the, maybe the failure in the first round picks that you had, it could lead to somebody pretty significant. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
We can talk about Victor Wembanyama. Already profiles being done. Hell, there were profiles being done about him at the beginning of the season. Brian Windhorst just released one.
It's heating up, though, baby. It is heating. Wemby Mania is heating up.
That's right. We can get to it in just a moment, but not before I attempt to get through a full read about Built Bar, because this episode is brought to you by Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat, but you don't want all of the fat and you don't want all the calories, then you got to try a Built Bar. I know we just got through the holidays. The warmer weather is here, though. Hell, it's going to be 75 degrees here in Charlotte today. Hey. So I know you want to get a little healthier, show off the bod a little bit. One way to do that and not compromise taste or maybe even that dessert flavored treat is you got to go with Built Bar, because they have great flavors: peanut butter brownie, coconut almond, churro. They're all covered in 100% chocolate, and they only have about 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar. They have 17 grams of protein in some of these flavors, so they're also high in fiber as well. It's a healthy candy bar for you. It tastes just like a candy bar, but it's healthy. It's crazy. That's right. You can head to your nearest Walmart today as well, and you can walk to the pharmacy section, grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box, or if you want more than that, then you can go to Sam's Club and grab a 13-bar box. If you just want to order from home, though, I get that. Go to Built.com, BUILT. Go to Built.com and get your Built Bars today. One more segment to go. Locked On Hornets. The last time we spun the wheel, it went horribly, horribly wrong in the sense that the Hornets have a 12.5% shot of getting the first overall selection. Well, the Hornets fell all the way to number 6. But we're going to try it again. We got another spin because, unlike the real lottery, we get to do the draft lottery simulator more than once. So, Doug, go ahead and spin the wheel, and we'll see if the Hornets can get that number 1 pick.
And I just want to say, I think what's working for us this time is if you look in that streak column, okay, Houston, worst record in the league. They've lost 7 in a row. San Antonio, second worst record in the NBA. They've lost 14 in a row, including to the Hornets. Detroit, they've lost 2 in a row. Look at Charlotte. They've won 2 in a row. I feel like the basketball gods are going to shine on the Hornets not doing the obvious tank job. So here we go. Let's spin that wheel. Tick, 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 tick. Woo! Boom! I mean, you could not have planned it any better. Number 1 overall.
Okay.
It's the Charlotte Hornets. Not only that, the Hornets get the number 1 overall pick, but then New Orleans jumps up 6 spots to number 2, which would just be poetic. If the Hornets got 1 and New Orleans got 2, that would just be beautiful because they stole our team, and they stole Anthony Davis.
It's a beautiful thing. I mean, Wemby coming to Charlotte, that would be fantastic. And you get to learn all about Victor Wembanyama with some of these profiles. Why don't you read us some of the excerpts of the profiles that we got, Doug?
Well, this is just an interesting quote here from a couple of profiles, by the way, published recently. One, because everybody went to Paris, apparently. I didn't get the memo. No one invited me to Paris. I didn't hop on a plane, but Kupchak was there. GMs were there. Brian Windhorst from ESPN was there. Jeremy Woo in his final piece for the skeleton of Sports Illustrated, because that's a dying publication. Shout out to Jeremy Woo, though. He's been on the show. We love that guy. He's going to land somewhere amazing. Hopefully we're locked on. We should scoop him up. But Windhorst and Woo did these profiles. I'm going to read a portion here from Windhorst's profile. Says, quote, "He's not used to coaching these types of teams because we're kind of special." This is Wembanyama talking about his own coach of those the Met 79ers, the Metropolitans. He says he's not used to. Okay, this is him talking about his coach. He's not used to coaching these types of teams because we're kind of special, He's like a Bible of basketball. He doesn't give me too much freedom, so that also allows me to think about myself and think about how I could do things better for my teammates. I've been a million times wrong, a million mistakes in games this season already, but I feel like we're only getting better as a team, and we talk a lot. And he always explains things calmly to me, even when he's angry. So that's Wembanyama talking about his special relationship with his coach for the Mets. Walker, does that profile of a coach remind you of anyone? Someone that calmly is a Bible of basketball, that calmly explains things to you even when he's angry. Does that remind you of anyone?
Yeah, I think James Borrego was very good at that, and I think he'll be excellent on whatever stop. Oh, you mean Steve? You mean Steve Clifford?
It sounds exactly like Steve Clifford. Wembanyama would love Steve Clifford, just like LaMelo Ball loves Steve Clifford's straightforwardness. I think Clifford is a Bible of basketball. I think what's cool about Clifford is that he understands what used to win, but he understands what wins now. Like, he pays attention to how the game changes, and he adapts and adjusts to that, even while still holding on to some sort of fundamental philosophical principles about what it takes, to win in this league. So, he can hold both of those things in his head. And he does have a great way of getting through to players, without scolding them, because I think he's talked often about, how you deal with professional basketball players, how that relationship has to go. So I think Wembanyama would love Steve Clifford, and I'm really glad that we hit the lottery here and got Wemby, because for people that, I can't imagine that too many people listening to this podcast don't know. But if you don't know, like, Wembanyama is an alien. Like, the way he handles the basketball, his length, his wingspan, are all just top notch, and he is going to revolutionize whatever team he's a part of. He's hitting this like running 3-point shot. Like, he's actively working on this shot that no one has ever really like attempted without it being sort of a heave kind of thing. Like, he's developing this shot as part of his game. It's going to be crazy. And if the Hornets hit the lottery here, wow, it's going to change the game.
It's like the stupid TikTok videos where guys will jump from the 3-point line and shoot 5 feet inside the 3-point line and said, is it a 3-pointer or is it a 2-pointer? Except that's just Victor's wingspan hitting that 5-foot threshold inside the 3-point line. And the other thing is, I just saw, I think it was Brian Windhorst in his profile. Apparently Wembanyama grew. Apparently he's 7'5" in shoes now. Like that's the thing for a 7'4" guy. You can grow to 7'5". So, I mean, nuts. So the fact
I don't
that
think he's going to stop.
it,
I mean, I wouldn't. I would say his ceiling needs to. Well, actually, his ceiling. We need to get him a house with a tall ceiling. And he's because I think he could get to 7'10". I think he's going to be like that plant in Little Shop of Horrors. Like you just keep feeding him. I will say another interesting thing from the Windhorse profile is that they're being very careful about the amount of weight that they put on Wembanyama, right? Because you look at Wemby and you say, wow, kind of looks a little Sean Bradley-esque. Like I'm a little
not KD though. Like it's not so crazy. Oh my God, eat a cheeseburger skinny. Like he's got something to him.
That's true. And they say like he's working, or maybe not doing it now, but he was, as he was developing, he was eating 5 times a day just to keep like his muscles essentially in line with the way his bones were growing, right? But it's all very interesting, but they're being very careful about not succumbing to the pressure that I think is just sort of hanging in the air when GMs are looking closely at you. The pressure to put on a lot of weight. And that's so key because I'll bring up an example of a guy who did that way later in his career, although he was a rookie, maybe rookie or second year in the league. That was Emeka Okafor, who came into the league as the Hornets' first round pick, won Rookie of the Year. And then people started getting in his head about, hey, you're Rookie of the Year, but you put on a little weight and you could just dominate. You could get a back down game. You could dominate the league. You could compete with Dwight Howard if you put on a little weight. So Emeka did that, and it busted up his knees, and it caused his injury. I think it was part of his injury history that really derailed what could have been a fabulous career. So I'm glad that people are learning from the mistakes of the past, and that Wemby isn't succumbing to that pressure.
I think people kind of think that about Greg Oden too, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. And they were kind of worried about that with Anthony Davis, not to do that too much. So
yeah, that didn't really work for AD. I mean, guy can't get on the floor.
Yeah, that's true. The injury history is there with AD. All right, thanks for making Locked On Hornets your first listen today. Make your second listen game to game NBA. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. Have a great rest of your day. We'll be back with you tomorrow.